Thank you for stopping by. Before we dive into a chilling and haunting story of crime, I'd like to take a moment to invite you. If you enjoy thrilling detective tales, unsolved mysteries, or simply want to explore the darker corners of the human soul, consider subscribing to our channel right now. Your support helps us continue bringing you the most authentic and high-quality content. Now, let's step together into a world where darkness hides beneath a peaceful facade, a story that is true, or perhaps only seems to shook America to its core. The year was 2012. Cedar Creek, Ohio was the kind of town people moved to for the quiet. Nestled in a verdant valley, surrounded by rolling hills and the meandering eponymous creek, it boasted tree-lined streets, a historic town square with a bandstand, and a collective memory that didn't stretch much further than the annual Harvest Festival or the high school football team's latest winning streak. Its population, a modest 18,000, prided itself on community, on knowing their neighbors, on leaving doors unlocked on warm summer nights. That sense of security, built over generations, was about to be obliterated with a brutality so profound it would scar the very soul of the town, leaving an echo of terror that would reverberate across the nation. It began subtly, with a chill in the air that had nothing to do with the crisp autumn approaching. The first victim was Sarah Miller, a 28-year-old librarian, known for her quiet demeanor and her uncanny ability to recommend the perfect book. Her quaint, two-story Victorian house on Maple Street, with its meticulously tended rose garden, was usually a beacon of gentle domesticity. On the morning of September 12th, it became a crime scene. Detective Ethan Black, a man whose face had seen too many late nights and too many grim discoveries, received the call at 6:17 a.m. His partner, Sarah Chun, a sharp, analytical mind barely in her early 30s, was already pulling up to the Miller residence when he arrived. The scene was disturbingly neat, almost clinical, which was perhaps the most unsettling detail. There was no forced entry, no sign of a struggle in the living room or kitchen. The house, usually so vibrant with the scent of old paper and fresh coffee, now held the faint, metallic tang of fear and something far more sinister. Sarah Miller was found in her bed. Her body was positioned with an unnerving precision, covered by a pristine white sheet, drawn up to her chin. Only her face was visible, serene, almost asleep, if not for the dark, bruised halo around her neck. The pathologist would later confirm manual strangulation, swift and efficient. No defensive wounds, no signs of sexual assault, just death, delivered with chilling, calculated intent. "Looks like she knew him," Chen murmured, her voice tight, as she surveyed the master bedroom. The forensics team, led by the meticulous Dr. Eris Thorne, was already meticulously cataloging every fiber, every dust particle. No forced entry, nothing stolen. Just her. Black grunted, his gaze sweeping the room. It was disturbingly bare of personal touches, considering it was a bedroom. A small, unlit bedside lamp, a paperback novel face down on the nightstand, a glass of water. A single, perfectly preserved white lily lay on her pillow, next to her head. It was an offering, a calling card. Or he wanted it to look like she knew him, Black countered, his mind already sifting through possibilities, discarding the obvious. The lily is a statement, not a personal one, a theatrical one. The news ripped through Cedar Creek like a wildfire. Sarah Miller, gentle Sarah, brutally murdered in her own home. The initial shock gave way to a pervasive fear. Whispers began in the grocery store aisles, at the school gates. Neighbors eyed each other with newfound suspicion. Locked doors became the norm. The charming quiet of Cedar Creek transformed into a suffocating silence, punctuated by the shrill cries of police sirens. The investigation hit a wall almost immediately. No witnesses, no forensic trace of the killer beyond the evidence of strangulation. The lily was generic, available at any florist. CCTV footage from nearby streets showed nothing out of the ordinary. Sarah Miller had no known enemies, no volatile relationships, no secret life that could explain such a violent end. She was, by all accounts, an ordinary woman living an ordinary life. And that, Black knew, was what made it truly terrifying. An ordinary victim meant anyone could be next. 2 weeks later, the fear intensified into outright panic. John and Mary Henderson, an elderly couple revered for their community service and their famous apple pies, were found dead in their farmhouse on the outskirts of town. Their granddaughter, Jessica, discovered them when she went for her usual Sunday visit. The scene was eerily similar to Sarah Miller's. No forced entry, no struggle, no robbery. They were found in their bed, Mary holding John's hand. Both had been strangled, and on John's chest, resting precisely, was a single, perfectly preserved white lily. 2 victims, 2 weeks apart, Chun stated grimly, staring at the Hendersons' peaceful, lifeless faces. And the lily, it's the same signature. Black felt a cold dread settle in his stomach. This isn't just a murderer, Chun. This is a ghost. He moves unseen, unheard. He leaves no trace but his victims and his calling card. The media, ever ravenous, quickly dubbed him the Cedar Creek Strangler. The town, once so proud of its tranquility, was now synonymous with terror. The Cedar Creek Police Department, accustomed to petty theft and minor traffic infractions, was overwhelmed. The FBI was called in. Special Agent Rachel Vance, a seasoned profiler with an intimidatingly calm demeanor, arrived with a team of forensic experts. Vance was known for her ability to crawl inside the mind of a killer, to find the twisted logic in their madness. The lack of forced entry is significant, Vance stated during their first joint briefing, her voice low and steady as she reviewed the case files. Her eyes, sharp and intelligent, scanned the faces of the local officers. Either these victims knew their attacker and willingly let him in, or he is exceptionally skilled at gaining entry without detection. The precision, the lack of struggle, the post-mortem arrangement, it speaks to control. Absolute, chilling control. Dr. Thorne, the lead forensic scientist, confirmed Vance's assessment. There's no trace of DNA that isn't from the victims. No fingerprints, no hairs, no fibers. He's meticulous, almost surgically clean. And the lilies, they're always perfect specimens, handled with care, as if they are part of a ritual. Black shared his initial gut feeling. He's not just killing them, Agent Vance. He's staging them. It's a performance. A performance for whom? Detective? Vance challenged softly. The public? Us? Or himself? The task force grew. Whiteboards in the makeshift command center were covered in victim profiles, timelines, maps of Cedar Creek with red pins marking the locations of the murders. Sarah Miller, the quiet librarian. John and Mary Henderson, the beloved elderly couple. No discernible link between them beyond the killer's method and signature. They were different ages, different social circles, lived in different parts of town. The commonality is their normalcy, Chen observed, frustrated. They were all good people. No dark secrets, no enemies. They were just ordinary. Precisely, Vance mused, tapping a pen against her chin. The choice of victims suggests a motive that isn't personal revenge or financial gain. It's ideological. He's choosing people who represent something, or perhaps people who represent nothing to him at all, making them merely instruments for his message. The town of Cedar Creek was a pressure cooker. Local businesses suffered. People rarely ventured out after dark. Parents kept their children under strict supervision. Every unfamiliar face was scrutinized. Every car driving slowly down a street was eyed with suspicion. The once friendly neighborhood watch became a paranoid vigilante group, armed with flashlights and a terrifying sense of dread. Black found himself sleeping less, haunted by the images of the victims' serene, lifeless faces. He knew this kind of killer, the ones who lived among you, unnoticed, until they chose to step into the spotlight of their own making. He knew the frustration of chasing a shadow. 3 weeks after the Hendersons, the Cedar Creek Strangler struck again. This time it was a family. The Rodriguez family, Mark, a middle school teacher, his wife Elena, a stay-at-home mother, and their 10-year-old daughter, Lily, were found in their suburban home on Willow Lane. The discovery was made by a concerned neighbor who hadn't seen the lights on or heard any activity for a full day. The scene was a grotesque mirror image of the previous murders, but amplified by the number of victims. Mark and Elena were in their bed, hands clasped. Little Lily was in her own room, tucked into her bed, a teddy bear clutched in her arms. Each victim had the telltale bruising around their neck. And on each pillow, next to their heads, was a single pristine white lily. The terror was no longer confined to whispers. It was a scream echoing across the nation. A small, quiet town in Ohio had become the epicenter of a chilling serial killer investigation. Cable news channels ran constant updates. Pundits debated the psychology of the killer. The sheer audacity, the methodical nature, the growing body count, all without a single witness or a tangible lead, made the Cedar Creek Strangler an enigma, a horrifying urban legend come to life. Black stood in Lily Rodriguez's bedroom, the weight of the child's death pressing down on him. The pink walls, the princess bedspread, the innocent toys scattered around it was a sanctuary violated. He looked at the white lily on her pillow, its purity a stark contrast to the darkness it represented. This killer wasn't just taking lives. He was stealing innocence, peace, and hope. He was dismantling the very fabric of Cedar Creek. 3 locations now, Chin said, her voice strained. Different demographics, different parts of town. But the signature is undeniable. He's escalating, Vance interjected, her face grim. From single victim to a couple to a family. He's growing bolder, more confident. He's testing us. Or he's just getting started, Black muttered, looking out of Lily's window at the darkening sky. The setting sun cast long, skeletal shadows across the manicured lawns. The quiet of Cedar Creek had returned, but it was a predatory quiet, a silence that held the promise of another unseen strike. The ghost was still among them, a silent predator, weaving his web of terror, and the town, along with the detective sworn to protect it, could only wait for his next horrifying move. The hunt had just begun, but the hunter remained invisible, a specter haunting the heart of America. The autumn leaves of Cedar Creek, once a vibrant tapestry of reds and golds, seemed to mirror the somber mood of the town. The initial shock had curdled into a simmering fear, punctuated by desperate pleas from local authorities for any information, no matter how small. Reward money grew, but leads remained elusive, like mist clinging to the creek banks. The media frenzy showed no signs of abating, transforming the quiet Ohio town into a macabre tourist attraction for rubberneckers and true crime enthusiasts. Detective Ethan Black and his partner, Sarah Chun, were living on coffee and adrenaline. Sleep was a luxury, dreams a torment of victims' faces and pristine white lilies. The investigation, now a multi-agency task force operating out of the Cedar Creek High School gymnasium, felt like a Sisyphean task. They were chasing a ghost, a phantom who left no digital footprint, no DNA, no witnesses. FBI agent Rachel Vance had established a complex profiling strategy, working tirelessly with Dr. Eris Thorne's forensic team. The data points were meticulously charted, victimology, ordinary, well-respected members of the community. No apparent connection beyond their perceived normalcy. From a single female to an elderly couple to a young family. The escalation indicated a growing audacity, a need for greater impact. Method: manual strangulation, swift and efficient. No signs of struggle. Entry: no forced entry. Signature: the white lily, always pristine, placed carefully on the victim's pillow or chest. The precise arrangement of the bodies almost posed. Lack of evidence: the most perplexing aspect. No usable DNA, no fingerprints, no forced entry tools, no surveillance footage. The killer moved with absolute stealth. He's a ghost, Black repeated, running a hand through his perpetually disheveled hair during a late-night strategy session. He walks in, kills, stages the scene, and walks out. Without a sound, without a trace. Vance, calm as ever, adjusted her glasses. He's not a ghost, detective. He's a human being. A highly intelligent, extremely cautious, and profoundly disturbed individual. The no forced entry is critical. It implies either the victims knew him, or he's a master of deception, perhaps impersonating someone official, or even using a sophisticated lock-picking technique that leaves no trace. But the lack of struggle suggests the victims were either caught completely off guard, or they were rendered incapacitated before the strangulation. Dr. Thorne chimed in, reviewing his notes. Tox screens on all victims have been negative for sedatives or incapacitating agents. They were awake, conscious. This points back to the element of surprise or a deep trust. He approaches them, and they don't perceive him as a threat until it's too late. Chun, ever practical, pointed to the map. The locations are spread out. Maple Street, the farmhouse, Willow Lane. It's not a geographical pattern. It's almost random. Or it's designed to look random, Vance corrected. He's diversifying his targets, making it harder for us to build a profile based on proximity or victim type. He's deliberately throwing us off. The pressure on the task force was immense. Local residents, terrified, organized neighborhood patrols, but their amateur efforts often led to false alarms and increasing paranoia. A nervous citizen reported a suspicious white van. Another described a creepy man lurking near a park, all of which led to dead ends and further frayed nerves. The FBI established a tip line, which was flooded with calls, mostly from concerned citizens, conspiracy theorists, and the occasional attention seeker. Each had to be vetted, consuming precious resources. Black felt the weight of the community's fear. He saw it in the eyes of the parents dropping off their kids at school, in the shuttered storefronts, in the way people flinched at sudden noises. Cedar Creek was dying, slowly, suffocating under the ghost's terror. One particularly bleak Tuesday morning, the ghost struck again. This time, the victim was Martha Jenkins, a beloved second-grade teacher, 55 years old, a pillar of her church. She lived alone in a charming bungalow near the Cedar Creek Elementary School. Her body was discovered by a colleague who grew worried when Martha didn't show up for morning assembly. The scene was a haunting replica. No forced entry, no struggle, manual strangulation. Martha was found in her armchair, a book open on her lap, a serene expression on her face. And, of course, a single, pristine white lily placed delicately on her chest, nestled between the pages of her book. He's taunting us? Chun seethed, slamming her fist against a desk in the command center. He knew we'd be looking for a pattern, and he gives us Martha, an older, single woman, different from the family, different from the elderly couple. How are we supposed to build a profile? Vance remained stoic. He's a master of psychological warfare. He's playing with our expectations. But the common thread remains. The ordinary individual, the lack of struggle, the lily, the meticulous staging. He is consistent in his inconsistency, if that makes sense. Dr. Thorne, examining the photographs of the scene, pointed out a subtle detail. Look at the book, Agent Vance. It's To Kill a Mockingbird. Classic. And Sarah Miller was a librarian. The Hendersons were known for their community involvement, like the moral backbone of a town. The Rodriguez family were educators. Martha was a teacher. Black felt a jolt. He's targeting the good people, the moral fabric of the community. He's systematically dismantling the ideals of Cedar Creek. Vance nodded slowly. That's a very plausible theory, Detective. He's not just killing individuals. He's attacking the symbolic heart of the town. He's asserting his power over their sense of security, their values. The lilies, in their purity, could be ironic, or they could symbolize the innocence he claims to be taking from the world. The task force shifted its focus. They began to build a psychological profile of someone who would target symbols of community virtue. Someone who was intelligent, meticulous, and deeply resentful or disillusioned. Someone who saw himself as a judge, perhaps, cleansing a world he deemed impure, or exposing its false veneer of goodness. The suspect pool widened exponentially, encompassing anyone who had a perceived grievance, anyone with a history of social isolation or a superior intellect. Days bled into weeks. Fall gave way to winter, and the first dusting of snow-coated Cedar Creek. The town was a shell of its former self. Christmas decorations remained in their boxes. The annual holiday parade was canceled. The only thing people talked about was the strangler. One evening, Black and Chun were sifting through Old Town records, looking for any obscure connections between the victims. They were exhausted, their nerves frayed. Black found himself staring at an old high school yearbook from the early 90s, left carelessly on a desk. A random thought, a flicker of an idea sparked in his mind. Chun, Black said, let's assume the no forced entry isn't about trust, but about access. What if he's not picking locks, but has a key? Chun looked up, intrigued. A key? How? He'd need multiple keys for multiple houses, unless he's a locksmith or works for property management. But that doesn't fit the profile of a solitary, intelligent killer. Or, Black pressed, what if he doesn't need a physical key? What if he has access in a different way? Think about the victims. Sarah, the librarian. Henderson's, community leaders. Rodriguez family, teachers. Martha, a teacher, who might have legitimate, if not always direct, access to their homes, or at least their trust enough to be let in easily without suspicion. Chen's eyes widened. Service people? Utilities? Mail delivery? But that's too broad. And they'd leave a paper trail. What about someone who interacts with the community in a less official, more personal capacity? Someone who could gain entry under the guise of an innocuous request. Black continued, his mind racing. A handyman, a charity worker, someone selling something, or someone who was invited in once and made a copy of a key. This line of inquiry led them down several new, frustrating alleys. Every handyman, every cleaner, every delivery driver in Cedar Creek was scrutinized. All yielded nothing. Then, a subtle detail from Dr. Thorne's original forensic report resurfaced. On the first victim, Sarah Miller, a microscopic trace of pollen was found on her clothes. It wasn't from the white lily. It was a very specific type of pollen, rare in the area, usually associated with certain exotic orchids, cultivated in controlled environments. At the time, it had been dismissed as an anomaly, perhaps from a visitor's clothes or a stray particle. But with the growing list of victims and the killer's meticulous nature, it suddenly became significant. Vance, during a review of all forensic data, picked up on it. Dr. Thorne, this orchid pollen. Is there any local source for it? A botanical garden, perhaps? A private collection? Thorne, who had been meticulously cross-referencing all known flora in the region, frowned. It's highly unusual, not indigenous. We identified it as Phalaenopsis bellina, an epiphytic orchid. Very delicate. Only a handful of private growers in the state cultivate it. There's a specialized nursery about an hour's drive east, but no public gardens that feature it prominently. Black and Chun exchanged a look. A specialized nursery, Black echoed. A meticulous killer, leaving a rare botanical signature. Someone with an interest in precision, cultivation, beauty even, someone who might grow their own lilies. This was the first tangible lead that pointed not just to a method, but to an interest of the killer. Orchid cultivation was a niche hobby, requiring patience, knowledge, and a sterile environment. It suggested someone methodical, detail-oriented, with a keen aesthetic sense traits consistent with the meticulous staging of the crime scenes. The task force now had a new direction. Search for anyone in Cedar Creek or the surrounding areas with a known interest in rare orchid cultivation, particularly Phalaenopsis bellina. They cross-referenced this with anyone who had access to the victims' homes, even indirectly, or anyone who fit the developing psychological profile of an intelligent, socially detached individual with a potential resentment against societal norms. The sheer volume of data, however, was still daunting. They found a handful of orchid enthusiasts in the broader region. Each had to be investigated discreetly. The killer had shown a penchant for careful planning, for evading detection. He wouldn't be easy to uncover. Just as the team felt a flicker of hope, another crime scene unfolded. This time it wasn't a murder. It was a message. A package, addressed to Detective Ethan Black, arrived at the Cedar Creek Police Department. It was nondescript, wrapped in plain brown paper, with no return address. Black, always cautious, had the bomb squad clear it before opening. Inside, nestled on a bed of dark soil, was not a white lily, but a single, exquisitely cultivated Phalaenopsis bellina orchid bloom. Its petals were a deep, velvety purple, veined with intricate patterns, its center a vibrant yellow. It was breathtakingly beautiful and utterly terrifying. And with it, a note, typewritten, the fabric phrase. The silence grows louder. Do you hear it, detective? The death of quietude. I am everywhere, and nowhere. The seeds are sown. The message was a direct taunt, a chilling confirmation that the killer was not only aware of the investigation, but was actively watching, mocking their efforts. He was aware of their new lead, the orchid pollen. He was demonstrating his omnipresence, his ability to penetrate even the fortified walls of the police department. He wasn't just a ghost anymore. He was a calculating architect of fear, enjoying his macabre game. Vance stared at the orchid, her face unreadable. He knows. He's telling us he knows what we're looking for, and he's challenging us to find him. The seeds are sown, Chun repeated, her voice barely a whisper. What does that even mean? Is he planning more murders? Is he planting a new kind of terror? Black looked at the vibrant, deadly bloom, its beauty a facade for the darkness it represented. The ghost had finally revealed a sliver of himself, a twisted piece of his intellect, but it only deepened the mystery. They were closer, they felt it in their bones. But the killer was still one step ahead, dancing in the shadows, waiting for his next performance. The winter snows had arrived, blanketing Cedar Creek in a deceptive peace, but beneath the frozen surface, the seeds of terror had indeed been sown, ready to sprout with devastating consequences. The hunt was about to enter its most dangerous phase. The orchid sat in an evidence bag on Dr. Eris Thorne's lab table, an unsettling symbol of the killer's brazen confidence. The typed note, meticulously analyzed for any hidden clues, yielded only the unnerving revelation that the strangler was likely using a common, mass-produced typewriter, or a very old one, further masking his identity. The threat, however, was palpable. The seeds are sown. It hung over Cedar Creek like a poisoned cloud, a promise of continued horror. Detective Ethan Black and Sarah Chun, alongside Agent Rachel Vance, felt the urgency in their bones. The killer was actively engaging them, taunting them with his intelligence and his mastery of evasion. The orchid, once a subtle clue, was now a direct challenge. He sent the Phalaenopsis bellina because he knew we were looking for it, Vance stated, pacing the command center. He knew our latest lead. This means he has access to our information, or he's watching us very closely. He's within our circle, or he has a way to infiltrate it. The possibility of an insider sent a chill through the entire task force. Every officer, every FBI agent, every civilian staff member was subjected to background checks and increased scrutiny. The paranoia, which had infected the town, now permeated the very heart of the investigation. Black focused on the physical evidence or lack thereof. The lily, the Phalaenopsis bellina. He's not just a killer, he's a gardener, a very skilled one. And the note, the seeds are sown, connects to that. Chun pored over lists of known orchid cultivators in a 100-mile radius. It was a long list, but now they had a new filter. Individuals with any past connections to Cedar Creek, any history of grievances, or any behavioral flags that matched Vance's evolving profile. The profile now included extreme narcissism, a superior intellect, a meticulous nature, and a deep-seated resentment against perceived societal hypocrisy or mediocrity. The killer likely viewed himself as an arbiter of justice or beauty, cleansing what he saw as flawed. Among the names, one stood out, Arthur Penhaligon. Arthur Penhaligon was a man in his late 40s. A reclusive botanist, he owned a small, highly specialized orchid nursery 20 miles outside Cedar Creek, known for its rare and exotic specimens, including Phalaenopsis bellina. He had inherited the nursery from his grandfather and lived a solitary life, dedicating himself to his plants. On paper, he was unremarkable, even benign, but his background check revealed a few interesting details. Cedar Creek connection. Arthur had grown up in Cedar Creek. He'd attended Cedar Creek High School, the very building now serving as the task force's command center. He'd graduated top of his class, a brilliant, if socially awkward, student. Past grievance. During his senior year, he was accused of plagiarizing a research paper, a charge he vehemently denied. While he was eventually cleared, the incident deeply humiliated him. The principal at the time was Mark Rodriguez, the middle school teacher who was one of the strangler's victims. Martha Jenkins, another victim, had been one of the teachers on the disciplinary committee. Sarah Miller, the librarian, had been a student assistant in the library at the time and, according to old records, had testified that Arthur had borrowed certain unique botanical texts that were later found to contain passages remarkably similar to those in his paper. The Hendersons, as respected community leaders, had publicly supported the school's decision to investigate. Psychological fit. Vance found old school reports that described Arthur as brilliant but isolated, prone to self-righteousness, and struggling with perceived injustices. His profound sense of intellectual superiority, coupled with a history of social isolation and a clear, documented grievance against figures connected to his past humiliation, resonated deeply with the profile. His meticulous nature, evident in his orchid cultivation, matched the killer's precision. It's circumstantial, Chun cautioned, but it's the strongest link we have. He has a motive, a connection to the victims, the means botany knowledge, and he fits the profile. And the specific orchid, Thorne added, the Phalaenopsis bellina. He cultivates it. He has it in abundance. Black looked at Penhaligon's yearbook photo, a thin, intense young man with piercing eyes that seemed to hold a simmering resentment. He was the ghost all along, hiding in plain sight, cultivating his rage like his plants. A covert surveillance operation was immediately set up around Arthur Penhaligon's nursery and his secluded home. The team watched, waited, and analyzed every move. Penhaligon lived a quiet, almost monastic life. He tended his orchids, ordered supplies, and rarely left his property. He seemed utterly oblivious to the storm raging in Cedar Creek. Then, one rainy Tuesday, the pattern shifted. A delivery truck, carrying specialized potting soil, pulled up to Penhaligon's nursery. Arthur himself came out to sign for it. As he turned, a small, dark object slipped from his coat pocket and clattered to the wet gravel. He bent down, retrieved it quickly, and went back inside. The surveillance team, however, had captured it on camera. It was a key. Not a typical house key, but a skeleton key, a master key designed for older locks or for making copies. That's it, Black breathed, watching the grainy footage in the mobile command center. The no forced entry. He's not picking locks. He's using a master key, or a copy he made. This is how he gets in without a trace. Vance nodded. It explains the ghost-like entry. He would study the homes, perhaps during his youth, understand their locking mechanisms. It speaks to meticulous pre-planning. The pieces of the puzzle began to click into place. The resentment over the plagiarism incident, the specific victims, all connected to that past humiliation, directly or indirectly, the meticulous method, the signature lily, and now the plausible means of entry and the taunting orchid message. Arthur Penhaligon wasn't just a suspect. He was likely their man. The decision was made to execute a search warrant on Penhaligon's property. The timing was critical. They needed to catch him off guard before he could destroy any evidence or, worse, strike again. At 4 a.m. the following morning, under the cover of a thick fog, a SWAT team, accompanied by Black, Chan, and Vance, descended upon Arthur Penhaligon's secluded nursery. The air was heavy with the scent of damp earth and exotic flowers. They breached the door to his modest home. Inside, the house was sparse, meticulously clean, much like the crime scenes. No signs of struggle. No personal clutter. The walls were lined with bookshelves, filled not with fiction, but with botanical tomes, texts on horticulture, and old, leather-bound books on plant anatomy. Penhaligon was found in his conservatory, a glass-walled sanctuary brimming with orchids. He sat on a stool, tending to a Phalaenopsis bellina, his hands delicately pruning a wilting leaf. He looked up, his eyes devoid of surprise, almost as if he had been expecting them. There was no fear, only a strange, almost serene acceptance. "Gentlemen, Agent Vance," he said, his voice calm, cultured. "I presume this is about my little hobby. Arthur Penhaligon, you're under arrest for the murders of Sarah Miller, John and Mary Henderson, Mark, Elena and Lily Rodriguez and Martha Jenkins." Black recited, his voice firm. Penhaligon merely smiled, a thin, chilling curve of his lips. "The seeds have been sown, detective. The harvest is merely beginning." The search of the nursery yielded a treasure trove of evidence. In a hidden compartment beneath a potting bench, they found a small, custom-made wooden box. Inside were several intricate skeleton keys, each meticulously labeled with street names in Cedar Creek, and a set of tools for making key impressions. There was also a stash of pristine white lilies, carefully preserved, ready for use. And then, the most damning evidence of all, a collection of carefully labeled photo albums. Each album contained pictures of the victims, taken discreetly, often weeks before their deaths. There were also detailed notes, meticulously typed, outlining his grievances against each one, his justification for their cleansing. He saw them not as individuals, but as symbols of the mediocrity and hypocrisy that had once shamed him. The plagiarism incident was the root of his rage, festering for decades, transforming a brilliant mind into a twisted instrument of vengeance. He considered himself an artist, his victims his canvas, the lilies his signature. He believed he was restoring a kind of balance, a purity, to a world he felt had wronged him. The seeds he had sown were not just the terror in Cedar Creek, but the idea of absolute control, of a hidden hand shaping destiny. In the interrogation room, Penhaligon was disturbingly composed. He spoke calmly, methodically, detailing each murder with clinical detachment. He expressed no remorse, only a profound sense of satisfaction. His motive, he explained, was simple: to expose the inherent corruption beneath the veneer of goodness, to show that even the most ordinary lives could be shattered by an unseen, superior force. He saw the victims as components of the system that had unjustly judged him. The community leaders, the educators, the pillars of society, they represented the very institutions that had failed to recognize his genius. "They thought they could shame me," he said, his eyes gleaming with a manic intelligence. "They thought they could diminish my intellect. But I showed them the true power of a cultivated mind. I brought beauty to their endings. The lilies, a symbol of purity, to cleanse their tainted existence." His capture brought a collective sigh of relief to Cedar Creek, but the scars remained deep. The Cedar Creek Strangler, Arthur Penhaligon, became a name synonymous with quiet terror and intellectual evil. The town slowly began to heal, but it would never again be the same. The doors once left unlocked now remained triple-bolted. The friendly smiles were tinged with a lingering wariness. The sense of community had been irrevocably fractured. Detective Ethan Black, Sarah Chun, and Agent Rachel Vance received commendations, but the weight of the investigation, the faces of the victims, and the chilling calm of Penhaligon would forever haunt their memories. The ghost had been caught, but his legacy, the profound fear he had sown, continued to echo in the quiet streets of Cedar Creek, a stark reminder that sometimes the most dangerous monsters are not found in the shadows, but hiding in plain sight, cultivating their darkness in the very heart of a seemingly peaceful world. The seeds had indeed been sown, and their bitter fruit would be tasted for generations to come.